Yeah, as far as like the project overall, I kept working on it. It kept growing. One of the challenges was this program, this Awana thing. It basically only ran during the school year. So I would get some people dropping off at the end and then not really anything over the summer. And so it was a monthly fee. And I think that made sense because there was a lot of like record keeping type bookkeeping stuff you would use it for during the summer if you kept your subscription. But it didn't grow much, for part of the year. But yeah, I think at one point I think I got up to maybe $600 a month in revenue, which, doesn't sound like a lot, but when your food budget is $30 a month and you can't afford to pay your rent, which is, I think at the time, only $225, including all utilities. Wow. That's enough. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough because of all the student loan debts. 6 months after I dropped out of college, I had to start paying on them. And the monthly payments for them was basically as much as I was making from this. And so I couldn't, it wasn't growing fast enough. And I did some things to try to raise money for it, and it was still growing and whatever. I ended up taking another job, programming and keeping this going. But the end sort of, of this experience was I did change my opinion about, this Awana religious thing in general, becoming more of the opinion that it might have actually been kind of harmful to kids to sort of indoctrinate them with these religious ideas. And just the nature of this program, once I started thinking about it more, it made me feel uncomfortable. So I ended up shutting this down more on those reasons. I was like, I'm just not comfortable with what this is enabling. And, in hindsight, maybe I could have transitioned to something more generic or whatever. There were, I think, again, this would tie more into mental health type things and why I didn't do that. But it really was quite successful, I think, for the amount of time I put into it and what I got out of it. And, I didn't talk as much about this, but of course, the most important thing to me in all of this was how much it actually helped people. I would get emails from people all the time like, oh, this is just saving me so much time. And, people loved it. Like once I worked out all those weird kinks I had from writing my own database management system and, stuff like that, people really did like it and it really did save them time. And I think it was a really good user experience. I put a lot of work into that. I would pore over it. I would write on whiteboards and, scribble stuff. And I cared a lot about the end user experience and making it good. And I think it paid off and I think it was good. It's unfortunate that I think, what I ended up building it for wasn't something I ultimately believed in. And, I've had a lot of people since then tell me well, you should have just kept doing it. Who cares? These people are going to do their program anyways. You should have just made money off them. And, I, I guess I could have done that, but it's not me. I want to do things that I believe in, and it didn't feel right to do something that seemed like maybe it was enabling something that I felt could be harmful, and I think that's a big difference too. If it was oh, I just don't care about this anymore, that's different. But it was getting to the point where I was worried this was actively harmful to children. And so that made me uncomfortable. I'm I don't know if I'm okay with that. It basically, obviously, I ended up deciding I wasn't okay with it. And so I I let users know, hey, I'm going to shut this down, and I'm sorry, it sucks to have web services shut down. I said, I made the whole thing open source. I was like, if anyone else wants to run it, like, I don't want to, screw over these organizations. If somebody else wants to take it over and take over that responsibility, I made it available for people to do. And it also, had export options, so you could get nice spreadsheets of all the data and, import them into some other program if you wanted to. Yeah, I did my best to make the ending good, as good as it could be. And I did actually have some people contact me about running it. I never heard if they ever did. But yeah, I will try to remember to include a link to the source if you want to look at it. It's definitely interesting. I'm definitely not going to say it's like the best thing, I've ever created. It's, a lot of things in here, code where I'm like, yeah, wow, I wrote that. Okay. But that's how it goes, whenever you look at your old code. But yeah, if you're curious, I'll include a link, and you can take a look for yourself. The main file is keeptherecords.scm if you want a place to look. But yeah, that was the journey of creating my own first SaaS application. Dropping out of college, working on it pretty hardcore, and I don't think I did that great of marketing, but apparently it was good enough. In hindsight, another one of those things, I feel like I could have done a lot better. If I was really trying to make this work, I probably could have done, better at that. It's still tough for me even today. I'm not the best marketer, but this definitely taught me a lot about that. And I think when I think back on this project and what it taught me, I think one of the biggest things that it taught me, and something I always try to pass on to other people that want to start projects, is sort of twofold. One is to, start making things. So many people talk about making things, but don't make things. You got to start. And the second thing is, when you start, it's definitely easiest if you find a niche and find somebody that wants to use it right away. Like, I think that was really the key to how this was as successful as it was. It was because I directly made it for something that I kind of needed, but especially this person I was working with directly. And so I tell people this all the time. They'll be like, oh, I've got this great like B2B, app idea or whatever. And I'll be like, well, have you talked to anyone that is already doing this? Because like, if you're talking about that kind of thing, somebody's already doing it in a spreadsheet or using some other program or whatever, right? Well, have you talked to them? Have you gone through the pain with them? Have you seen what it's like? I think that's one of the best places to start. If you find a niche and you find people doing things with spreadsheets or manually or whatever, or, cobbling together some programs, if you find this real pain point and you just work directly with this one customer to create it for them, it's one of the easiest ways, I think, to start, because then you create something that people actually want. At least one person. And in my experience, if one person wants it, more people want it. So yeah, if I'm ever talking to people and they're asking me about my advice on these type of things, those are the things I really try to stress, is just like, start building it and find somebody to build it for right up front and get them to be super happy with it before you move on. It's not necessarily, there's other ways to build apps, of course. You could raise a bunch of VC money and throw it to the wild and hope people sign up. But if you're looking at what I call more of like a bootstrapped, like, create something that's immediately valuable and immediately usable that you can immediately get revenue from, this is a much, in my opinion, easier and more straightforward way to do it. And the other part is, it makes the marketing really cheap. Like, I barely marketed this thing, like posting on forums like a few times. I think that was essentially it. But it was a real thing that people really needed. And I think when I look back on those marketing messages, I can't find them now, but when I did before, I think they were effective because I knew the pain points. And so it was easy for me to write something that was like, hey, use my program. I solve your pain points that I know you have, and this is how I solve them. It was very easy and cheap to market, as opposed to, say, some big VC funded thing where you haven't found product market fit yet. You don't even know what people, if people even want it. Like, that's a very expensive thing to market. This type of approach can be extremely cheap, I think it even spread a fair amount via word of mouth, like people are just like, yeah, this is great. And told their friends, and that's the thing about building something that people actually want right up front. You get that as well.